Shannon mentioned the FSMA produce safety rule. That's kind of the one that I'm going to jump in a little bit. I'm not going to go through every little single detail because we're not going to sit here for 8+ hours, so that we don't need to do that today. So, but I definitely ask questions as we go. Before we jump into the produce safety rule, I do want to let you know that we have the Iowa-based team for teaching the FSMA stuff, but then we also have the North Central Regional Center for FSMA Training Extension Technical Assistance for the produce safety rule. So there's 4 different centers across the country. There's one in the east, one in central, one in the west, and one in the southeast. So there's 2 on the east, central, and then south, or west coast. And so Iowa is very lucky to actually be the host center for the central region. So a lot of Angela's responsibilities things are now managing the center, so that's where Teresa and myself and Sandy Andrews and Ellen and other names that you've probably heard, and I'll point all those out at the end here. That's where we all kind of come into play, kind of picking up and pulling the slack on the education side of things, as she's doing the upper level management, getting grant funding to keep things moving. So, okay, so the Food Safety Modernization Act, Shannon already covered that process. Oh, that didn't come through well. Anyway, so a little couple things I want to go through is what is the produce safety rule, what is the rule of ISU, the NCR region, and then kind of what are some of the things that are coming your way and some of the things that we're offering and what we can, there are things that we'd really like to get help from you from. So, okay, so the produce safety rule, as Shannon mentioned, is the first ever mandatory federal standards for growing, harvesting, packing of fresh produce within the industry. We'll walk through a little bit of who's covered, who's not covered here in a little bit. And then it goes on and sets some definitions for farms. Most everybody that's going to fall under the PSA rule in Iowa will fall under the farm definition with just a couple exemptions out there. So most businesses or farm businesses will fall under the farm standard rules. Why? As Shannon kind of hinted, we've had outbreaks. We've had leafy greens, we've had sprouts, we have had tomatoes and melons, and kind of a whole host of other crops. So it's putting some standard practices in there to help with prevention. Again, with the new rules, it's not about post-fact, we've had an issue, what do we do? It's let's make sure we don't have issues. Let's keep building our food system so that it is a strong, safe food system. So ultimately, as we find out here, there's not a lot of growers in the state that are going to fall under the required to be fully compliant with the full FSMA produce safety rule standards, but really all growers should be thinking about food safety, should be thinking about how are they growing their produce. You know, when you're in a tight niche group like we are within Iowa with local food systems, you know, one bad outbreak could really hurt the whole system. And then of course, you still legally have to put out quality, safe produce into the market. So just because you don't fall under the FSMA rules doesn't mean you don't fall under the FDA rules for requiring you to have safe produce. You can't knowingly put out unsafe produce into the market. That is against the law and has been for a long time. So, okay, so one of the handouts we didn't bring, and maybe should have, is the FDA guide sheet that actually walks farms through whether they need to be fully compliant with the law or whether they need to be partially compliant with the law or not. Oh, is it actually in there? Oh, look at that. Maybe I should look at the handout before coming to class. So it is in the handout. Well, we're actually going to walk through that handout to give you a little bit more idea of how this works. So if you're trying to work with a farm and figure out where they fall under the produce safety rule, number one question on that chart is, does your farm grow, harvest, pack, or hold produce? Or are you growing produce? Are you a produce business? Yes, you are. Okay, so you're not exempt from this rule yet. We got to keep looking at you. Okay, so does your farm on average in the previous 3 years have less than $25,000 in sales? There are quite a few farms that grow produce in the state that never make more than $25,000 in gross annual sales. If you're less than 25,000 on a 3-year rolling average, you're completely exempt from the rule. So you can kind of ignore this and go home. Don't worry too much about it. However, a lot of us are above that 25,000, and if you're trying to do it as a full-time job, I hope you are above 25,000.
Well, and I do want to put the caveat in too that even though you're exempt from the rule, you still have to be able to prove that you're exempt from the rule. So you need to have records that prove you're exempt from the rule.
Yes.
Whether it's your farm books or your invoice system, you have to have that part.
Yep, and there's actually...
So you're not free and clear.
Yeah, you're not free and clear. You do have to prove that you're exempt from the rule. The other thing, there's a handout most of you should have. It looks, can I borrow this?
Yeah.
That looks like this. It does cover some of those things. The other one, if you're buying produce from an auction or from other farmers and reselling it, you do have to put signage up, clear, visible, distinct signage up of where that produce came from. That's going to be a sticking point for a lot of businesses out there because they're not doing that. Okay, so is one of the commodities that you grow on the list of rarely consumed raw? And there's a full, complete list of rarely consumed raw products. So in Iowa, if you look at, you're primarily growing asparagus, beets, cherries, sweet corn, potatoes, sweet potatoes, pumpkins, squash. This is a complete list, but if you're growing the things that are basically cooked, that's a kill step. So that isn't covered under the produce safety rule. They're really focused on those foods that are fresh consumption. So the berries, the apples, the tomatoes, the peppers, anything that is not regularly cooked. Leafy greens would be the other big one. So most farms in Iowa are going to be growing some of these, and they're going to be growing some of the other crops. So you can't really rule yourself out yet. Okay, what's the last one? There we go. Okay, so is your produce for personal line farm consumption? Basically, if you're not a business selling externally, the produce safety rule does not cover you. So if you're just growing produce for your own personal consumption, that does not follow or fall under the rule. Let's skip one here. Okay. Okay, and then is your produce going for commercial processing? So just like the foods that are rarely consumed raw, if your produce is going for commercial processing, that has a kill step, that produce would be exempt. So think back, well, let me see, it's been 20 years ago now when Southeast Iowa was doing a lot of tomato production for Heinz, for ketchup. Those tomatoes would have been exempt from this rule because they're going through a kill step. So, or if you're growing apples that are going through cider production, there's a kill step there, depending on the percentage of alcohol. Question?
What if it's like being frozen? You know, you grow berries.
Frozen is not a kill step. Yep. So that still falls under the rule. Yep.
And even if you're just chopping the veggies, that's not a kill, it's processing, but it's not a kill step.
Yep, and that brings you back into the preventive controls rule that Shannon was talking about more here previously. So kill step is fermentation or heat. What other kill steps are there? That's it? Okay, so fermentation or heat. Fermentation is kind of one of those iffy ones. What's that?
Irradiation.
No, yeah, radiation. Which I guess there are a few that you said here. So basically, if it's going under heat for processing, that's a kill step. You can, that will kick you out of being under the produce safety rule with some exceptions, and that's what we're going to dump into here. So, okay, so then there's the Tester Act exemptions that Shannon hit on, and hopefully you don't mind if I jump in and expand on that a little bit. So, again, if you're in that $25,000 to $500,000 range, that gives you the qualified exempt. So that means you don't have to comply with all the rules, but you do have to comply with some of them. And again, that's what this handout goes into quite a bit of detail of what those are. Again, it is the proving that you're within that $25,000 to $500,000 food sales. It's water sampling, and then it's signage and labeling of where that produce came from. The signage and labeling can be signed at the farmer's market, could be labeling on the packets or containers that you're selling the produce on or in, or it could be contact info for on an invoice. Let me see, what else do they want to hit on that? So, okay, so if you're in that $25,000 to $500,000 range, that's kind of where most people are going to be at. The other caveats that it's in the same state are 275 miles, so that does affect a few of us on the borders.
There's a lot of stickiness in this one because you'll notice it moved from produce sales to food sales.
Yep.
So if you're a diversified farm and you're selling meat and other products, now those totals get thrown in to this number as well.
Yep, so that 500,000 is meat, produce, dairy, grains, wheat, barley, any other food type grains, anything that is going into a food product. It also counts if you're taking that food product and putting it into animal feed, either for livestock production or food going for domesticated animal feed.
So if you have a dairy, a commercial dairy that's selling into the commercial milk market, and you also have 3 acres of vegetables and you're selling the vegetables, if your dairy sales are putting you over this number, then
The whole shebang is now covered under the law.
wow.
Yep.
So maybe you need a separate LLC for your vegetable operation?
Well, and there's been some discussion on that, and the initial thought was ding, 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 that yeah, you need to have it under 2 separate businesses, but the FDA can still come back in and say, is this really 2 separate and distinct businesses that are fully separated from each other, or are these really not 2 separate businesses? And if they're not really 2 separate businesses, I don't think that's going to cut it. Right now, yeah, but I'm guessing that's probably going to shake down that, yeah. Or you're going to get by until there's a problem. So, but yeah, so if you have a big dairy and you're also growing produce, you are picked under the full cover. Brittany?
If you're lumping animal feed and stuff in there too, does corn and soy?
Corn and soy does not fall under the 500,000. That is separate. I found the list the other day. It does not include corn and soybeans. Yes, sir.
Good.
Yeah, it was on one of the chapters that we were going through yesterday, and it had a full list of food grain crops and corn and soybeans, unless corn and soybean is going under a food product.
Like sweet corn would be different, obviously. Than you know.
Sweet corn, yeah, sweet corn would be different, but that is a qualified exempt
Yeah,
crop
that's-
because it's going, you basically cook sweet corn.
Yeah, it's a non-covered crop.
Yeah.
So.
But, yeah, go
How
ahead.
about honey and bee products, like if you make products from,
Honey is a food product, so that would count on your 500,000 total.
what about if you make like balms and lotions, stuff like that, does that count?
You would need to have very good records to differentiate the difference, but if all that honey is grown together and then separated out, and so there's no differentiation of this honey over here is going just to the balms and things, and this honey over here is going to just food products. If you have that separated out, you'd be able to keep those separated and treat them differently. Most people treat it all under one bulk production. So all the honey in that case would have to fall under the production standards. Part of that. Yep. Okay.
The other part that's I find sticky with this exemption is that it varies a little bit in our traditional view of what a qualified or a direct end user is, because they do put grocery stores in there.
Yeah, and I think I've got. Give me a minute to come up with
Okay.
that. I think I've got it. Maybe not. I think yeah. Give me the next slide. Let me jump into a couple examples. Okay, so let's say you're selling tomatoes to Hy-Vee, and so that's where Teresa. You should just give a presentation.
No.
So as Teresa was getting at, there are market opportunities that you're allowed to sell to under the qualified exempt status, and that's 25 to 500,000. And then there's market opportunities that do not fall into that. And so regardless of sales totals, you fall under the produce safety rules. So you can sell to grocery stores, you can sell to direct to consumer, you can sell to restaurants. Those are all cut and dry, qualified end users that you can sell to and allow you to stay in that qualified exempt range. If you are selling to Capital City Produce, they are not a qualified end user because they are a reseller. And so they are turning around and handling that produce. So if you're selling all cucumbers to Capital City Produce, your business, even if you're under in that 25 to 500,000 range, you would be not exempt, and you have to be 100% compliant with the rules. So even if you're doing $30,000 in sales of cucumbers, you have to fully follow the rule. So then it gets even greater. Let's say we're selling tomatoes to Hy-Vee, and we're selling cucumbers to Capital City Produce. Now where do we fall into? Okay. So, sorry you're not exempt, maybe, unless you're completely over 500,000. So, I can't get rid of that. So, okay, so we're selling tomatoes to Hy-Vee, we're selling cucumbers, Capital City Produce, we're over $500,000 in sales, so everything falls under the fully compliant or fully covered part of the law, and you have to follow the law for the tomatoes and for the cucumbers. Now, if you're selling tomatoes to Hy-Vee, and that is 60% of your business, and you're selling cucumbers to Capital City Produce, and that is 40% of your business, now you do fall under the qualified exempt part of the law, because over 50% of your business is going to qualified end users. Yeah, confusing, right? Yeah. So it does start to get really gray, as Teresa was handling out. But again, if you're over 500,000, everything kicks under that bucket. So I got one more. Oh, so where this is really going to probably come into play is a couple individuals that are selling to Capital City or Lafredo's or some of the other bigger non-qualified businesses. Or like the sweet corn growers that are doing a lot of sweet corn production, and then they got businesses come back and say, well, can't you just grow a few tomatoes for me as well? Well, no, I can't, because then I'd have to be fully compliant with the produce safety law, whereas if I just grow sweet corn, I'm completely exempt, or I am exempt. So, some of the things, other businesses, the food hubs, do we ever get a full answer on the food hubs?
If you sell to a food hub, that's considered a distributor, unless there's specific ownership in there. So, I mean, if you're selling to a food hub that's completely independent of your business and they're taking ownership of your product, then they're considered a distributor, and that does not provide you exemption.
Right, but if you're selling to like the Iowa Food Co-op, where they don't technically own your produce,
Right.
and pass through, and you pay a fee.
That's considered a grocery store model.
Mm-hmm. And so that's the same way with the auctions, kind of get away from falling under the compliance thing, is because the auction doesn't ever actually take ownership of the produce. And then you can actually sell produce on the books to yourself through like your own grocery store and stuff then as well. That'd be okay.
So for our CSA, we buy the food from the farmers in our program, and then we're like packing the boxes with that food. So where do we fall?
I think you fall under the compliance part of it because you're taking ownership. Yeah. So I think I had this conversation with you maybe a few months. Yeah. Because you're taking ownership of the produce, you're not a qualified end user, so you do fall under that FSMA compliance side of things. That's why I think I strongly suggested at the time some sort of shared ownership in that CSA to kind of get around that.
So if they had an organized cooperative.
Yes. Yeah. A group of farmers can get together and share ownership in a store, share ownership in usable facilities, and that's fine. That's all considered under a farm definition that I didn't want to get into because it gets even muckier. So, but yeah, that's totally fine. Farmer owned. Yeah, Jason.
How are they different than a grocery store then? They're selling that produce to the end user.
That's a good question. I don't know that I necessarily have an answer for you at the moment. Let me look into that and get back to you a little bit.
So once you get into the world of food hubs, it is not as clear because there are so many different types of food hubs, and it's hard to get a straight answer on stuff. But we do know it's how your food hub takes possession as well as how it distributes. And it really is going to have to be a case by case, look at what does that mean.
There's a few other legal things with grocery stores and getting the grocery store certification versus an on-farm distribution type model. So like Jenny Quinter's farm in Urbandale, where she is not licensed as a grocery store. It's an on-farm stand, so she has different rules and regulations depending on for what she has to do and what she can and can't do as far as bathrooms and facilities and things like that. So there's some other odds and ends, but I don't have a good answer for you otherwise.
So maybe having the retail grocery license that the Iowa Food Co-op has.
Do they?
Versus,
Okay.
versus, I'm assuming they wouldn't have the food establishment license.
No, but that might be another option to look at because you do have bathrooms on site and some of those other things. Right.
I think the more you can make it clear that you're operating your aggregation center as a grocery store with proper licensure or as a restaurant kind of thing, then you can argue the case of how you're exempt or not exempt. This is very gray.
Yeah, and I mean, we have agreements with the farmers for other things in the program, so I don't know where I was going with that.
That might be one question to stick into the can.
Oh, so if it was like a service that we I guess if it's a service that we provide them, like we're doing it because, we're trying to help them access markets and people that, so it's more of, from our point of view, it's more of like a human service to help them find markets. So I don't know if that makes it, they probably don't care.
But at the same time, you really have to work hard. Sometimes it hurts my head to remember, you look at the perspective from the farmer side, where is that food going and how is it being sold? But then as a food hub or as an aggregator, you also have to think about the rules that apply to you. So and he's not covering that because you start to flip over into preventive controls. So there's different stages and there's exemptions for food hubs based on size as well. So look at it first from the perspective of the farmer and where stuff is going. Are they under 25,000 in sales? Does that make it, or how does, are they in that qualified exempt window, and what does that look like? So, I guess that's the thing.
Yeah, well, maybe talk a little more and see if we can come up with some other options.
The other thing that I've also learned when we're talking with Hy-Vee in Iowa is if you're selling it directly to the store and it goes out for display immediately, that's considered grocery store. But if you're selling it right into the distribution center, then that's considered distribution. And anything you sell through the distribution center, this cancels your exemption. So I've got a smaller farmer that normally if it was just going right into the store, he would be a qualified exempt farmer, but everything goes into the distribution center, so therefore he has to comply with the whole law.
Yep. But at that point, you use GAP certifying things as well, so adding the business stuff, business.
Yeah.
So, just listening in on the conversation, it sounds like we're all trying to figure out how we can make ourselves exempt. Is it really terrible to not be exempt? Like,
No.
Is it hard to have to follow the laws?
No. Let me jump over on the other side of things that I do on the other part of my job. GAP is coming and is going to be required for any wholesale type sales within a couple of years, and by that point, business is all going to be rolled into GAPs, and it's going to be no big deal, and blah blah blah. Let me jump over on my summer stuff I was doing this year. No, the paperwork's not that big a deal. It's actually pretty easy, I think. So,
Well, and I'm going to be talking about group gap here in a little bit, and how we've been trying to help move that along so that it is easier for farmers to get to the point where they want to be.
yeah, as far as doing the actual paperwork and being compliant, it's not that big of a deal, I think.
And I think one of your current concerns maybe is the training. So the training may be expensive. Right now, I think on our end, produce safety is, we have a reduced price for our training, right?
That's coming up, yeah.
Yeah, so ours is not as expensive as it could be, but like for
cities that are just not going to go through the hassle. And a lot of my clients fall in that range, unfortunately. But so they're just not going to go, and the response I get is, I just quit, be done. And I go, all right, whatever. So, okay. Let me see here. I think that's the same example. Okay, so we'll get into some of the classes and things. So the role of ISU, NCR, Central Region is to help farms be compliant with the law, whether they're under the qualified exempt range or under full compliance, and also to help create a safer food system. So like Teresa said, she's going to talk a little bit about the gaps, group gaps stuff. One of the biggest questions and concerns that we've had comments from farms is worrying about ISU being regulators. We are not regulators. We are not required to report things that we see on the farm. We're not regulators. That being said, I do operate on a fairly high morals and standards, ethics, whatever you want to classify it as. And if I see something really terrible, I am going to probably report it. I have not yet seen something bad enough to justify reporting. Okay, so the classes that we're getting into for the PSA class that is required for anybody that has to be fully compliant, but we also recommend it for anybody that's kind of in that qualified exempt range, because it does go over a lot of good gaps practices. It is a day-long class. We're offering it for $20, so it is dirt cheap. It comes with a big book of all the rules, the regulations, all the PowerPoints within the class, so comes with all the info that you need to kind of get up and going. There'll be some handouts as far as records and things like that. It's all part of it. And I think it's going to be part of GAP certification, if not now, in the future. Is that kind of what you told me? Thought I heard that again.
Strongly recommending.
Okay.
Because most of those farms that are looking at GAP certification are doing it because of wholesale business.
Yeah.
And once you start thinking about wholesale, produce really kicks in.
Okay. Somewhere in one of these bajillion meetings I've had, I've been told that FSMA is going to be a required part of the USDA GAPs at some point. So classes across the state, thanks to a bunch of people for helping get these set up already, but we've got Fort Dodge, Harlan, Sioux City, Kalmar, Indianola, Ottumwa, Cedar Rapids, Sheldon, and Mason City. We're really trying to spread these out across the state. So we got 9 of them scheduled for this year. And I'm trying to get one more set up down with the Amish guys down at the Lamoni Produce Auction. And then next year we'll be offering 10 more classes. Again, kind of spread out across the state, but not necessarily in the same towns that we offered. So if you didn't get in and you want to offer it next year, we can definitely work and try to get that happening. As far as help from you, oh, sorry, yeah.
How long does that, so I'm assuming it's like some kind of certification, like you get a certificate, or like, how long does that last, like, how long you say, like, I took this class forever, blah, blah, blah.
It is a forever. Thus far, they have not worked any requirements for recertification or anything, but that's not to say that that won't come down
Do
the
you have to
line.
have it attached with like a current farm business, or
No.
like, I'm just gonna get certified? so
Nope,
I
you can
can-
get certified. There's a lot of consultants out there that are FSMA certified already. So yeah, you can just take the class and just come and get the understanding kind of what's going on.
Shannon mentioned it, the certification goes with
It's
you.
you, that's your certification, that's not the farm certification, so that training goes with you.
Yep.
Is that renewable? Like, you go through it once and you're done? Or
Yes.
do you have to do it?
Go through it once and you're done. As of now, so there's been some talk of recertification credits or ongoing continuing education credits, but that's not in the law right now. Could be something that's added later, but thus far, you take it, you're done. So,
And to add a little more sales pitch to it, right now it is the only approved curriculum recognized by the USDA to meet the training requirement. Iowa is offering it for 2 years at a really dirt cheap price. So if you are not sure, or if you still think you're exempt, it'd still be a really good idea to go ahead and have this credential in mind. I've had people like you, local food coordinators, ask, should I go to this training? I'm like, I think it's a good idea, because it'll help you understand the rule. You'll get the big book with what all the rules say, and it may help you better explain things to the farmers that you work with. And it's gonna come to a town near you.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming close to you. It's dirt cheap. We've got a lot of farms that are at that 450, 475 range that are going to bump up into that qualified or that fully compliant range probably within the next couple of years as their businesses grow. So the numbers of people that fall under this are going to increase. So, it's a good foundation.
Well, it's a great chance too if you're a large enough farm to have employees. It's a good chance to bring in, you know, your crew managers and other folks to have them trained, just so you have some depth on your bench. So you always have that FDA person present, or if something happens.
How many people are able to attend each of these classes?
I think they're capped at 30. So, but I mean, 30 times 10 is 300 people, and another 300 next year. And if all the classes fill up, we will offer more. We, I think, have some budget if we need to offer more. So.
As far as notification, will growers be notified by mail or by us or by?
Hey, that's where we're going next. So I think Lynn Hughes got a email out a week ago that came from Ellen Johnson on the team, asking for your help spreading the word locally. So within your local groups, if you can get the word out through farmers, that would be great. Teresa is going to do some direct contacts. I'm going to do some direct contacts, but we want to make sure that we get everybody covered. So your help in advertising and marketing and pushing this out would be greatly appreciated. Because, yeah. Oh boy, I am looking for one other instructor to join the team. So I've talked with a few of you along the way. I think I've talked with you, and I've talked with a couple of individuals that aren't here. If anybody is looking to get certified, oh, and Morgan joined the team here last fall, whatever. So I'm looking for one more instructor to go get trained in order to help us locally within the region teach at the class. So Morgan, I think you're teaching at two of them. You're at 2? Okay, awesome. But they're all down in Southeast Iowa, so fairly close to where you're at, right? Please, that was, okay, that's what I asked that they do. So if you're interested, let me know. We've got classes down on November 28th and 29th in St. Paul, or up in St. Paul, Minnesota, and then we've got October 11th and 12th in St. Louis. Previously I had $500, now I have $1,000 in my pocket to pay you to go, pay your expenses to go and get that training. What we ask for in return then is that you help us out locally and teach, what are you teaching, one topic at each of the classes then, Morgan?
One of the classes I'm teaching one topic, but one I'm teaching 2.
Okay, gotcha. So not too strenuous, but
No, and I was able to kind of say what I felt comfortable teaching too.
yeah, we're not gonna
Well,
say.
and it's pretty regimented as to what, I mean, you can't go too far off script.
The book is really good.
Yeah, you basically, as you're going through the class, you have to stick slide by slide. You can't skip and create your own material. So, like I said, if anybody's interested, let me know. Because I'd like to get somebody down to training this fall yet. Because that was on my to-do list for the last 6 months, and I haven't got it done. So, okay, so that's the class side of things. So the classes are cheap and well worth going to, because the actual class out of our pocket is like 200 some bucks. So $20 is a steal of a deal. Okay, so once you get done with classes, again, we really want the farms to go to the classes, because if they go to the classes, then we can do what's called the on-farm readiness reviews, and that's where the team, so 2 of us from the team, plus probably a grad student, maybe IDLs, maybe FDA, will come out to the farm, and we'll actually go through the produce safety rule, go through their records, go through the whole program, make sure that they are compliant with the law before it ever becomes an inspection, to help them be compliant before an FDA inspector would actually show up as a real inspection. You have to go through the FSMA class though to get the on-farm readiness review. We come out, we spend, I don't know, we don't have the full details yet, but it's going to be 2 to 4 hours, 2 to 6 hours, depending on the complexity. Going through the farm, talking about what they need to do to make changes to become compliant, and then we actually have a follow-up visit the following year to kind of do one last final follow-up, make sure everything is good to go.
They're free.
They are free.
Confidential.
They are confidential. They are supposed to not turn into a inspection. As long as we keep the FDA out, that shouldn't be a problem. But we're waiting on final words for that. So, but they are free. You get detailed notes in there as far as what you need to do to become compliant. And I'm guessing we'll probably work more not just with a FSMA direct rule, but probably a broader gap thing is probably how I'll at least approach it. I'm guessing that's how you'll approach it. Yeah. But again, we're kind of waiting on some of the full details on how those are going to work. We should have that 6 months ago. So we're supposed to have that finalized in the next couple weeks. So how can you help? Again, help us get recruitment onto the classes, and then, you know, part of the marketing for the classes is that, hey, the team can come out and do these on-farm readiness reviews. Okay, and then one other thing that we'd really like help from with the group is water sampling. I probably went way over my 30 minutes, sorry. Is water sampling. So a lot of grumbling. What the rule is that you've got to use 1603 method for water collection and testing for E. coli determination. Well, there's only a couple labs in the state that do that 1603 method. You got to collect a sample and get it into the lab in 6 hours. Well, that's not really reasonable in a lot of locations in the state. So Manreet, Angela's grad student, is doing some research to collect those samples to see if we can stretch out that window to 24 hours. He really needs help getting on farm, collecting those water samples within a region, coming back and getting them tested. So he's been out to quite a few regions. Has anybody worked with Manreet thus far? Nobody's worked with Manreet? You have, thank you, John. Okay, I've taken Manreet out on a few locations, but really what Manreet needs help with is lining up growers, 4 to 6 growers, so you can hop down, boom, 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 grab the samples and get back to campus and run them within that 6-hour time frame. And I should have, oh, I did put Manreet's contact info up there. It's BHULLAR. That's his contact info, and he's got 35 samples that he'd like to get yet this year. And what he's finding is really good info. Shannon, yeah, you're on the
And
screen.
I have some of his sampling kits, so we're ready to be back. You're ready to be back. I have about 100 in the back of my car.
So if anybody wants to take some home, and
Is there like specific areas of the state? I mean, because obviously some places are farther from testing regions than others.
he's been up to Northwest, he's been out west, he's been up north, has he been up to your region yet? He hasn't been to your region? He needs to get up there, and he can definitely come down to you. And
And so for his research, he's testing, as Joe said, whether the results are the same, if you can do it within 6 hours, or whether you can do it within 24 hours. And so, for me, with my travel so far, everything seems about 3 hours away.
we've run into some 6-hour constraints where we were cutting it within like 5 minutes.
Well, then I know that can be helpful.
But we can get down there, we can get the samples. We just got to be really timely when we get down there to grab the water sample and get back up. I do want to note that these water samples are free. This is a $50-some test that we're doing free, or Manreet is doing free. So give them a call.
Well, and it's a great chance to not just test your well water, but also any surface water that you may be thinking about.
Yeah, so if you want to test your well, and you want to test your pond, or test the stream, or whatever, you can take multiple samples from your farm. That's fine. And the research results that we're getting seem to be pretty promising, just looking at stuff.
Just any farms?
Any farm. So yeah, if you want a sample, we can get a sample.
This part of research, I guess I wasn't understanding what you're saying.
produce farms.
Yeah, and it's a part of his, PhD dissertation.
Yep. So each farm will get a report back, just like you would if you sent it to a third-party lab. This is what the values are. This is what it is. You'll get it emailed back. It's usually pretty good within a couple days to 10 days, something like that. And then he'll run it for the 24-hour time period, and that part is completely anonymous. That doesn't get turned in with a name attached as far as his research and reporting goes. Other questions on the water stuff? And he will test rural water. I think he's been testing a few of those as well. So even if you're on a rural water source, it'll be fine. So,
They have to be produce farms. So
it should be a produce farm.
okay.
Yeah.
Is it something that, you know, people have to get their water tested annually for organic certification? Is it something that he'll give the results back and they can actually like
Yep.
use it like for, you know what I mean?
Yep,
Not just
because
for
you
the
guys
research.
are a certified lab, right? So it should work for their organic certification.
We can check into that.
I'm just saying, there's a
Yeah.
couple friends I have that, you know, maybe they would do it at say from $50.
Well, yeah.
Or you know, because you said it's confidential, but if they
Yeah.
could get the, I mean,
You'll get a full report back with the farm name and stuff like that for your 6-hour time frame, just like you would from a third-party lab.
okay.
So, and they're following the FDA procedures on it, or yeah. So, okay, one last slide. Our team member is Angela Shaw. She's our head of our team. She's the head of the North Central Regional Center. Kathy Strobing and Linda Nave are more on the regional center side of things, so you don't see them face to face as much anymore. Shannon's back there. Lakshman is another individual that's kind of new to this team. I don't know that he's been out too much yet. His background is restaurants, right? Food service. So, who else we got? Man, Rita's a grad student. Teresa, everybody knows. Sandy Andrews is a new one to our team that we just hired last spring. She'll be doing a lot of the teaching courses. Ellen is our scheduling person, so if you need to schedule anything, it'll all go through Ellen. Paul Overham is our IDOLS, or our Department of Ag contact. A lot of the funding is flow-through funds that comes from FDA through IDOLS through Iowa State, but Paul is extremely active and a great partner. You'll probably see him at a few classes. You'll probably see him at a few of the on-farm site visits as well. And then Morgan is back there, and then I'm as well on the team. So, let me see here. And then a couple helpful connections. Iowa FSMA at Iowa State is the email that goes to Ellen and Angela and Sandy. So one email will get to the team, and then it'll find its home from there. Safeproduce.cals.iu State is our food safety webpage.